Ever wonder how the institution of marriage came to be? How did it evolve over time? Well, let's take a deep dive into the origins of this age-old tradition. The best available evidence suggests that marriage, as we know it, is about 4,350 years old, born out of the necessity for more stable family arrangements as hunter-gatherers settled into agrarian civilizations. The first recorded evidence of marriage ceremonies uniting one woman and one man dates from about 2,350 BC in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Over the next several hundred years, marriage evolved into a widespread institution embraced by the ancient Hebrews, Greeks, and Romans. However, it might surprise you to learn that in its early forms, marriage had little to do with love or religion. It served more practical purposes, reflecting the needs and norms of societies at the time. While the concept of marriage has ancient roots, it had little to do with love or religion in the beginning. So, if not for love or religion, what then was the primary purpose of marriage? Well, it was a bit more pragmatic and less romantic than you might think. Marriage served as a binding contract, tying women to men to ensure that a man's children were his true biological heirs. This binding wasn't just metaphorical, but literal. In the ancient Greece betrothal ceremonies, a father would hand over his daughter with the words, "I pledge my daughter for the purpose of producing legitimate offspring." This was a world where men could have several wives or satisfy their desires with concubines, prostitutes, and even teenage male lovers, while wives were relegated to the household. The wife's role was to produce offspring. If they failed in this primary task, their husbands could simply return them and marry someone else. So you see, marriage, in its earliest forms, was more about societal order and property rights than love or companionship. Now, when did religion enter the picture, and how did it influence the institution of marriage, you may ask? As the Roman Catholic Church grew into a formidable institution in Europe, the blessings of a priest became a necessary step for a marriage to be legally recognized. By the 8th century, the Catholic Church had widely accepted marriage as a sacrament, a ceremony bestowing God's grace. This was written into canon law at the Council of Trent in 1563. But did this religious intervention change the nature of marriage? Well, it did to some extent. Church blessings improved the status of wives. Men were taught to show greater respect for their wives and were forbidden from divorcing them. Christian doctrine declared that the twain shall be one flesh, giving husband and wife exclusive access to each other's body. This brought new pressure on men to remain sexually faithful. However, the Church still upheld that men were the head of families, with their wives deferring to their wishes. While the Church brought some improvements for wives, it still upheld patriarchal norms within the family structure. But when did love become a key ingredient in the recipe for marriage, you might wonder? Interestingly, the concept of romantic love as a primary motivator for marriage is a relatively recent development in the grand historical timeline. This sentiment came into play much later, around the Middle Ages. Before then, marriages were mostly arranged for practical reasons, such as consolidating power or wealth. Love was often a happy byproduct, but not the driving force. However, with the advent of the Middle Ages, a shift occurred. The idea of romantic love, intense and passionate, started to emerge as a compelling reason for marriage. And who do we have to thank for this shift? Many scholars point towards the French. French literature of the 12th century started to paint a picture of knights fervently in love with someone else's wife. Think of Sir Lancelot's love for Queen Guinevere. This idea of romantic love, of wooing and winning the heart of the beloved, started to permeate societal norms and expectations around marriage. Romantic love, it seems, was a game-changer for the institution of marriage. So, how exactly did the introduction of love change the dynamics of marriage? The concept of romantic love brought a seismic shift to the institution of marriage. It wasn't a mere swapping of practicality for sentimentality. It was a complete reimagining of what a marital bond could be. Before love entered the picture, marriages were largely transactional, designed for economic stability, social alliances, or to ensure legitimate heirs. But with love, the emphasis shifted to personal fulfillment and emotional connection. This transformed marriage from a societal necessity to a personal choice, a choice to share one's life with another based on mutual affection and respect. It also sparked a change in societal norms. The idea of choosing one's spouse led to the gradual acceptance of women's rights within marriage and the expectation of shared responsibilities and decision-making. Marriage has come a long way from being a practical arrangement to a partnership based on love and mutual respect. And yet it continues to evolve with society.